their strategies for overcoming this issue wasn't a long-term solution. It was more of, well, let's pray more, let's read scripture more about this topic, let's bounce your eyes, let's replace our thoughts. And though there's a place for those things and certainly serve as temporary solutions, I found myself still kind of coming back to the same issue, to the same struggle. So there wasn't any deeper healing going on inside of me, which was extremely frustrating. Now, since we're dating and talking about marriage, there was a part of me that also held some myths about marriage and
Hmm.
sexuality. And that was kind of perpetuated by the church, which was, well, once I get married, it shouldn't be as big of an issue, right? I'm
Right.
able to have a God honoring, glorifying sexual experience within the context of covenant marriage, right? So that kind of became the sort of default solution. Only later to discover is that, oh, that just magnifies the issues that are already there. It doesn't solve them.
Welcome to the
So,
Faithful and True podcast. I'm Randy Everett, your co-host, and we are here today with special guests. First of all, our usual leader, Greg Miller. Greg, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's good to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. Greg just landed from Chicago. We're happy he got here in time. And our special guest today, coming to us all the way from Troutman, North Carolina, are Aunt and Brittany Gonzalez, who are two members of the Faithful and True team. And they're our special guests today on the podcast. How are you guys doing?
We're doing really great. I'm excited to be back, and this time with my beautiful bride who gets to show off her tremendous wisdom today.
To be here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is exciting. And for those of you that have been following Faithful and True, you know that our team has been growing, and Anthony and Brittany are just a part of that. And we thought it'd be great for us to take some time to introduce them and for them to share a little bit about their own experience. And for those of you that have been watching the podcast, you know that Anthony has been on a couple. In one, we talked about the gamification of recovery and the benefit of that and the challenges of that. And we also talked about the ROI, and I had to learn what that was because that's not my background. But it's great, Brittany, for you to be with us. And so, just to begin with, a little bit of introduction for both of you, and in that, share how y'all met.
Absolutely. Well, I can go first. Again, my name is Anthony Gonzalez, born and raised in Miami, Florida. I met Brittany. We met in college, and I have a background as a pastor, went to seminary, but my spiritual career commingled with my own struggle, and we'll share more about our story as this episode goes. But nonetheless, it has been a tremendous journey to what we'll talk about how the lows can really set things up for the highs, and God used my relationship with Brittany to help set that up.
Yeah, and my name is Brittany Viola Gonzalez. I have a history of being an athlete. That's how I would deem my entire past before we met.
Mm-hmm.
I was a D1 athlete at the University of Miami and happened to be invited to church by a teammate and ended up meeting this guy at that friend's wedding on the dance floor. This
Oh,
guy.
that's great.
Yeah, so fun fact, I was also a private salsa instructor, and
Oh,
these mutual friends of ours wanted to learn how to dance salsa. And so we met at their wedding and connected on the dance floor, and we haven't stopped dancing since.
okay. And so, what I hear, Brittany, is you came to faith as a college student. Am I hearing that faith was not a part of your experience growing up, or just it wasn't a significant part of your experience growing up?
Yeah, it wasn't a significant part of my experience growing up. Where my faith really started was when I was 18 years old, and I had been struggling with body image, and ultimately it turned into an eating disorder while I was in high school. I went inpatient when I was 18, and it was there that I accepted Jesus into my life. I also got my first feelings chart, and I experienced raw community, which I have
Yeah.
seen as three staples for my continued growth and recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's interesting is, you mentioned that you were an athlete, and we often talk about the importance of team and being on a team. But my experience is the deepest, most meaningful teams are a team of people who are in recovery, because there is that authenticity, there is that openness. So one other question. I love your middle name. Tell me about Viola.
Oh, well, it's an awesome name.
It
I
is.
actually, he wanted to take on Viola because it's my maiden name that I moved to my middle name when we got married. But I grew up in a sport family, and my dad played Major League Baseball, and so Frank Viola is my dad, and he is well known in the baseball field. To me, he's dad, and I love him. And as I get older, I'm appreciating his gifts and skills and how he shared them so well and his time.
Yeah. Well,
And even
great.
today.
Okay.
He's,
So, yeah. Oh, go ahead, Randy.
I was going to say your dad is a big name here in Minnesota because he was a big part of our Minnesota Twins winning the World Series. So he's maintained his superstar status here in Minnesota. So
I'm glad that you're here,
I was
Randy, because
unaware of that.
there's no way I would have known that.
No.
So you're contributing some of the sports history that we need. Okay, so tell us a little bit. Y'all get married, and then a little bit about y'all's journey together.
Yeah, so I'll just share early on, especially in this area we're talking about of just sexual conversations and discovery. Early on, Anthony had told me that he struggled with this area, and I was so grateful to hear him say that because at the time I had the mindset that that's just normal. Like all men
Mhm.
struggle in this area, and you just kind of it's just a part of their lives, and you just kind of have to get over it or understand it as women. And so when he said it was a problem, I was like, wow, like I love how you're taking that seriously. And I really admired it. Fast forward in our dating, as we started talking about marriage, I saw that the struggle was still there and it wasn't something that I wanted to be a part of our marriage. And I was grateful at that time and was willing to get help. And, and we've reflected on that journey. That's the getting the right help is kind of
Mhm.
hard sometimes.
Mm,
Right. And what's also true is early on, even as we're naming it, we don't fully understand what the issue is or what the problem is. And most of the time, when we begin the conversation, we're focusing on the behavior. And so we create a bunch of strategies to stop the behavior. We emphasize the behavior. And it's not until we try that or have that effort for a while that we begin to realize that's not going to work. And so my guess is, as Anthony was talking about it. It was hopeful. We're going to be able to address this. And there was a belief that with the right amount of effort directed towards the behavior, eventually it would go away.
that's right. And what was true for me is the first place I went for help was the church. I sought some guidance from the pastoral leadership, and in many ways that was helpful, but then in some ways it was insufficient. Their strategies for overcoming this issue wasn't a long-term solution. It was more of, well, let's pray more, let's read scripture more about this topic, let's bounce your eyes, let's replace our thoughts. And though there's a place for those things and certainly serve as temporary solutions, I found myself still kind of coming back to the same issue, to the same struggle. So there wasn't any deeper healing going on inside of me, which was extremely frustrating. Now, since we're dating and talking about marriage, there was a part of me that also held some myths about marriage and
Mhm.
sexuality. And that was kind of perpetuated by the church,
Mm-hmm.
which was, well, once I get married, it shouldn't be as big of an issue, right? I'm
Right.
able to have a God honoring, glorifying sexual experience within the context of covenant marriage, right? So that kind of became the sort of default solution. Only later to discover is that, oh, that just magnifies the issues that are already there. It doesn't solve them.
Right.
So that was an awakening reality for sure.
And I want to validate that. I mean, a lot of times men will have shame about the fact that they were told it wasn't going to solve it when they get married, and there was still a part of them that believes it. And that makes perfect sense. We don't know how the impact of being sexual in our marriage is going to impact our addiction until we're actually married. And so for a guy that was kind of naive or in some ways trusting that getting married was going to be the thing that solved this, I just want to validate that. We don't know what we don't know, and we don't know it until we don't know it. And that's what happens for a lot of guys and for couples, especially if the wife knew about it prior to the relationship. There is a part of us that assumes we will be different and this will resolve the issue once we get married.
Yeah. And I
So,
think that's where we did hit when we did get married. to not see the struggle go away, but to see it continue. And then that's where I think, and I don't want to speak for you, but it seemed like greater shame came about
Mm.
in his life that he was struggling in marriage. And so it's a sad reality.
Yeah, it evoked out of me a even deeper shame to say, well, what's wrong with me, or what's wrong
Mhm.
with my marriage, that I'm still struggling with this. And add to that another layer where I began to serve in ministry. So I was a pastoral leader in our church. And so there was an added layer of shame of, well, I'm married and I'm a ministry leader and I'm dealing with this thing. And I'm supposed to be helping others with this kind of area. So
Mm.
that added that motivation to keep it under control, to keep it secret, to keep it to myself, which, as we now know, like that only adds fuel to the fire.
Mm.
That grants it more power over me. And so I tried to manage going to some counseling where I told partial truths, even to my counselor. I was acting in shame, even in therapy. And so I want to normalize that too for some people.
Yes.
Feel like they're going to therapy, but they're not bringing 100% of themselves there, right? They're kind of reserving
Mhm.
that final 20%. That was true for me. And so eventually Brittany found evidence of my acting out, on one of my devices, and she confronted me about it. So what is this? And I remember my knee-jerk reaction was to cover it up, to say, well, that wasn't me. That was an update or a hack or something. Put the blame on something else. And there was so much trust in our relationship that kind of Brittany was willing to accept that response I had given her. But then I came away from that feeling even more distant from her, feeling deeper shame about things, and realized, like, who am I becoming? What is going on in me? And eventually that led me to come back and disclose to her, albeit it wasn't a full disclosure. It was one of those partial disclosures,
Mhm.
which I don't recommend, but at least it was something to say,
Right.
okay, I'm coming out with this problem and taking ownership that was me. I did do that. And then brought that to the leadership of our church, who, kudos to them, took a posture of care towards me. They could have said, all right, you're done, you're fired. But instead, they said, we want to see you get well. We want to see your marriage grow, even out of this, and gave me some time, a leave of absence. And it was in that leave of absence that we were then referred to Faithful and True and first introduced to the workshops here.
Okay. How long had y'all been married when this was going on?
This
Yeah.
was in our first year of marriage.
It was a year and about 8 months. And so we had an 8-month-old child. And
Okay.
that's what I remember. We got pregnant and I was nursing.
Yeah, so I guess into our
So it
second year, I
was
should say.
it was a lot. So it was into our second year, and so we're very fresh, like fresh into living with each
Mhm.
other, learning about each other, and it was really hard to. He became like lead, a youth pastor, like lead, and then a dad. We were both in seminary or like master's studies. There was a lot going on in our lives, and looking back, that was an unhealthy rhythm, for us
Mhm.
to have
Yeah.
and maintain. But it was a year and 7 months ish. And I remember just so much didn't line up. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the crazy cycle of like, I ask a question, but it doesn't seem complete. It doesn't seem
Mhm.
whole. I was having dreams and they were very vivid. And it was about betrayal and as if Anthony was going off with other women. And there was like I don't care kind of mentality and in the
Mhm.
dream. And it was like my body was having trouble. Like I was just feeling a lot. And so all my senses were saying something's off. And I'm hearing Anthony say he's doing well and he's been sober for like, it was like a year. And yet I discovered that he had been lying that entire time. And so when all of that came up, I was kind of like disabled. Like I
Mhm.
had this little baby. He went back to work after this like big bomb went off and all these new discoveries. And he goes to work and I was with this little baby, Micah, and Micah started crying and I could not console him. I was like, I just stared at him and I was like, I called Anthony. I said, you need to come home immediately. And I was so grateful that our counselor at the time just directed us to Faithful and True. And within 2 weeks, he was at the men's workshop. 3 weeks later, I was at the women's workshop. So June of 2015 was a beautiful reset where like
Mhm.
our foundation was, it's like we had somewhere to stand.
Right.
Mhm.
So I love that we got into that quick. And I was just reflecting, I got into your wife's Beth's group right away.
Yeah.
That became another stabilizing
Hmm.
step for me.
Well, and I think part of it is I just want to, for those of you who are listening, to validate this idea that many times the first prompting is an intuition within us that says something is off. And it can be from a spouse who doesn't feel like the information is lining up. It can be from her body telling her that things are not fully as they seem. And it can also be from dreams. It can be that unconscious part of us that is prompting us maybe to consider something more closely. And I also think that that's true for men, is that for many of us, we were taught not to trust our intuition, not to trust our guts. And yet, it's the denial of that inner GPS that I think is God's spirit that creates some of the most chaos for us. And so part of this awakening is awakening to the truth of who we are and the truth of our situation and the truth of God. And sometimes that awakening to the truth is very disorienting because it's challenging what our perception was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go back to the early days. What are some of the things from the early days of recovery that you did well that you're thankful for? What are things that you've learned just from those early experiences? Because a lot of the people who come through Faithful and True, their lives have just been disrupted. There's just been information. There's a lot of chaos. So what's helpful for them to know from y'all's experience?
Well, I can start by just saying attending the Men's Journey workshop was a big investment of time and finances, but it produced great return. And I know we've talked
Hmm.
about this in the previous podcast, but one of the truths that really stuck with me, and you said this, Greg, and I know you say this regularly, is that my acting out were attempts to meet a legitimate need in an illegitimate way. And that became kind of the linchpin of realizing, like, oh, this isn't about trying to get
Mhm.
rid of something. This is about
Mhm.
trying to discover through something
Mhm.
and asking the questions, what's going on in me? What's driving me towards these behaviors?
Yeah, but in the past, like you said earlier, Greg, it was behavioral focused.
Hmm.
It was all about stopping the behavior because when the behavior stops, I'm going to feel better and this relationship's going to be better.
Hmm.
But really, after Faithful and True, we started asking questions and looking at what's the deeper stirrings going on? What are the deeper needs that we're really needing to implement in our lives so that it can take care of what's being stirred up?
Hmm.
Hmm.
So, one principle we wrote just in preparation for this is that life's lows can springboard us to high heights.
Hmm.
And we were thinking about this because partly Brittany's sport background is in diving. She was both a springboard and platform diver. So the springboard is, flexible board by which the diver approaches the end of the board, and the push down creates the inertia to lift them up into the air
Mm-hmm.
and complete their dive. And that moment of coming all the way to that bottom point, um, Brittany can speak about this in a moment, but it parallels well with life's lows and having
Hmm.
patience to work through it because of what it can lead to next.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like one thing that I thought about early on is that this is truly a journey. And I love that we call it the men's journey workshop and the women's journey workshop because I wanted to just have everything fixed. I wanted it to all be better magically, and I don't want to feel this pain anymore. But the truth is that healing and growth takes time, and it's a process. And I am naturally impatient. So
Right.
this is like I'm at a tension point here. Um, but earlier on, it's funny to think about how I responded to Anthony sharing truth. So like I have this very vivid memory of when we were dating, and he shared that he had struggled. I literally left the car, didn't say a word, and I just pieced out, didn't say anything. He's sitting there. I don't know how long I was gone, but it was a while. He didn't know if I was coming back. We're somewhere where I do need a car. He can't just leave me there. It was such an awkward situation. And I was so grateful for his maturity to, even though he did something wrong, he had pressed in to say, hey, like, is there another way that we can go about how that, just how that interaction went? And I just remember feeling challenged, like, oh, yeah, like if I were you on that end, I wouldn't have liked that. That's confusing. And
Right.
so to start teaching myself to, in respect, say, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to need some time to process. let me take a few minutes or 30 minutes, whatever I think I need. Let me take some time to just walk and process, and I will be back.
Right.
And that felt like a trained skill, but that was something I did very poorly at the beginning. Was I would emotionally get worked up, and there were two responses. Like, one was shut down, and I just get quiet and turn the head,
Mm.
I give them the back of my head, or I flee and I just like dismiss myself from the discomfort.
Mhm. And in that moment, as you can imagine, for me, that felt like abandonment.
Right.
That felt like I'm out of here. Um, I don't want to deal with this, and I'm left with the mystery of like, what do I do next? And so that can deepen the shame of like, oh man, I just told the truth, and now look what happened, right? But to have the patience to even sit through that, and thankfully she did return. I don't remember how long it was either, but I was like, she's got to come back because she's not
She
here.
needs a ride.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't have Uber back then, um, so I'm waiting in the car, and eventually she does come back, and we kind of re-regulate with each other. But then I was able to make that request that she mentioned, and that was such a growing moment for us to recognize, like, okay, we can communicate about how we want to communicate with each other, and that's kind of like that meta view of the relationship, right? 'Cause we can have a conflict about any issue, but to come back later on and say, like, hey, how we do this, is there a better way to do this? And that set us up well moving forward.
Well, one thing I think I hear is there really are two kind of people. One is they quickly find words and want to communicate. There's another group of people that struggle to find their words initially, so their tendency is to pull inward to find the words. And one's not right, one's not wrong. They're just different. Because the person who finds the words quickly sometimes may say something that later they regret. And then the person who struggles maybe to find words initially, it can appear as if they're pulling away from the relationship. And so we can learn from each other. Sometimes the person who says a lot of words may want to slow down and take a pause before they start speaking. And, in the person who struggles to find the words, even if they're able to find the words that say, I'm trying to find my words, that keeps them engaged in the relationship. I want to go back to this idea of the difference between the springboard and the platform. So, no shock, I'm not a diver, but I've watched a lot of it. And what's interesting is that's a great image of how some people enter into recovery. For some people, there is this springboard, some sort of circumstance that has propelled them into the air, into the recovery, and they're trying to figure out how to the best of their ability, land gracefully. But there are those people that they just launch themselves off a solid surface. They're the ones that they don't get caught. They've not been exposed. There's just been an internal disruption, and they've determined from this solid place of the status quo, they want something different. So they launch themselves into recovery. And I think what's important is no matter what your circumstance is, if you're one that had some big upheaval that launched you into recovery like a springboard, or you were someone that just determined, I want something different for my life, and I chose to jump, there's still the same issue of making sure that you're getting all the resources that you need and doing what you need to do so that you can land well.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I thought about a springboard, like, it takes technique, it takes coaching to be able to specifically do springboard. I will tell you, springboard's harder than platform.
Mm.
Platform, you literally jump off the thing. It doesn't move, it doesn't help you. You use the strength you have and you go. Springboard, if you have the right coaching, the right techniques, the right tools, you will be able to press the board down with greater efficiency, and it will throw you up to do higher dives with higher scores, higher value. And what diving does not emulate well, it's more of an individual sport. So what
Right.
I imagined in this process is as the board is being pressed down, like the best divers in the world on springboard are very patient. My coach used to tell me, hold your arms up in the air. And as you hold them, the weight gets harder and harder. It's pushing the board down. Then you circle and you go. But I can't tell you how many times I wanted to circle early.
Mhm.
I just wanted to circle and I just wanted to go, but I would not get the height that I needed to fulfill the dive. And so as my coach is telling me to hold my hands, it's like that's what recovery felt like for me. recovery felt like I'm holding my hands forever and I'm pushing down and this is hard. It's like the
Hmm.
weights on my legs. Like you got to be strong to hold that board down. You got to be balanced. And so like that's what recovery, going to my group, going to counseling, doing the iceberg and checking in with myself. Like those are the things that are hard. They don't
Hmm.
come naturally. It's like a trained skill that faithful and true. We talk about all these different great tools. They're hard to do the tools. And then what I imagine is this beautiful community around me. And that's not symbolized in diving, but just imagining a community around me while I'm in the low.
Hmm.
And then just seeing what happens. Because like once you start swinging and you go, like you fly to great heights. And so like that, those lows are hard to be in. But what we have seen is that those low lows lead to the greatest heights both Anthony and I have ever experienced in our lives. So
What I
yeah,
hear is it's stewarding, being a good steward of the springboard. Knowing how, and I don't know this, but there's some physics in there. So understanding whatever the physics are of the springboard, the idea of being patient, waiting until the maximum time. And what I think is true for you is true for many of us. We want quick results. We want immediate shifts. We want to feel better quickly. And sometimes it's the slow, patient waiting, and it's active waiting and waiting for the transformation to continue to be realized.
And Brittany, you rest assured that your springboard analogy is going into the Greg Miller Library of Analogies. He's the king of the analogies, and the springboard is a new one that I'm sure will get retold time and time again. That's
Yeah, we'll find his way back. Well, what's true is y'all are not at the beginning of recovery anymore, so you're kind of down the road. What are some of the lessons for those that maybe have been on the journey for a couple of years? What have you learned about this part of the journey and would be helpful for other people to understand?
I would say the same tools that helped us at the beginning of recovery and principles are many of them are timeless,
Hmm.
therefore are still applicable, still valuable even today. And so that's being in community, sharing vulnerably with the right people, asking questions about myself, becoming curious about triggers or temptations that we face, talking about how do we talk to each other and continue to work on our communication as a couple, being having skill and patience in the lows, because other types of lows will show up in life. They may not be, addiction related, but they could be finances, they could be family, they could be health. And so, you know, leveraging those towards the high heights.
yeah. And I was thinking about something very different that changed after Faithful and True was getting curious about those triggers for him and for me. So instead of wanting to run away from the problem or get mad at him about the problem, it was more what's getting stirred up in me and what do I do about it in a healthy manner. So the three circles um, became something so helpful for me that I have my own hoop. Anthony has his own hoop, and we have a relationship hoop. But what really helped me at the beginning was focusing on my hoop and what do I need and how do I take responsibility for my own thoughts and my own feelings, my own pain. And so I started really taking action steps that helped me. I believe it just helped our relationship naturally.
Hmm.
Like as I did that, and even when we experience some sort of tension relationally, I just go back to my hoop and I
Right.
focus what's mine. And then I get to bring that back to the relationship hoop. But I think that those triggers become such an opportunity where something new is revealed for myself, but also for our relationship. We learn how to support each other better. And I think what happens with those triggers is I just want to run away or they're very scary. There have been times in our journey where I may have had a dream that was really uncomfortable and I share it with him. Um, but I don't want to share it with him. I choose to share it with him.
Hmm.
And I think that has been a big difference in our recovery journey is choosing to share things that I don't want to share
Mm.
because it's an opportunity. Something good is going to come out of this odd situation.
Right. Well, and recovery is always moving towards that which we would rather avoid, whether it's a pain that we don't want to feel, a conversation we don't want to have, an uncomfortableness that we don't want to experience. but we're choosing a life of moving towards the things that we don't want to experience because that is the nature of addiction is avoiding something, denying something. And so having those conversations that are uncomfortable is just a part of the journey. And that's part of what we do later in recovery is we continue to engage each other in some of those challenging places. Okay. Well, guys, thanks for being with us. So we're going to give you that opportunity. Is there anything else that you would like for our audience just to hear from you at this point?
There's hope. There's hope. No matter where you are at in your recovery, in your addiction, in your coupleship, um, there is hope no matter how low that
Mhm.
word feels like it's getting. Um, you know,
Yeah. And likewise, there's a community. There are people who, if you're going to try to do the individual sport in this recovery journey, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
You need a team and a safe team who's skilled and know what they're talking about.
mhm.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for being
And
with us.
Brittany, yeah, I was just going to say the same. I was going to thank Brittany and Ant for joining us today. Your story is inspirational to many of our viewers and listeners out there. You're kind of the model faithful and true couple that we like to bring forward and share with people who are struggling and haven't found the answers that you guys have. We'd like to invite all of you who are watching to visit our website, faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find many resources and available information, as well as information and online registration capabilities with our 3-day intensive workshops. We have the Men's Journey workshop that we offer every month. We have the Women's Journey workshop, which is offered on a quarterly basis. And we also have two different formats of the Couples Journey workshops. So the information about those events are all on faithfulandtrue.com, and we invite you to check all of those out on your own. In the meantime, thanks to Brittany and to Ant. Thanks to Greg. Great job of leading our podcast as usual, Greg. And we hope that this coming week will be a week that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.